I was working the night shift at the gas station, as I often did. It was a quiet night, and I was passing the time by scrolling through social media on my phone. That was until a customer walked in and sent shivers down my spine. He was a tall, lanky man with a thin mustache and greasy hair. He wore a stained shirt and pants that looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. His eyes were piercing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was looking right through me. I tried to ignore him and went back to my phone, but he wouldn't leave me alone. He kept walking up to the counter and staring at me, making me feel uncomfortable and scared. Suddenly, he asked me out on a date. I froze in fear, not knowing how to respond. I tried to politely decline, telling him I had a boyfriend, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. As the night wore on, he grew more insistent, and I could feel his eyes burning into me every time he came up to the counter. I didn't know what to do, and I was starting to feel trapped. Eventually, he left, but the fear stayed with me long after he was gone. Every time I heard a noise outside, I couldn't help but wonder if he was coming back. I was alone, vulnerable, and terrified. The rest of the night passed in a blur, and I was relieved when my shift finally ended. I rushed out of the gas station and into my car, grateful to be leaving that creepy customer behind. But as I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, watching me. I knew I would never forget that night and the fear that had consumed me. As I drove home, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. The thought of that man still being out there somewhere made my blood run cold. I kept looking in my rearview mirror, half expecting him to be following me. When I finally made it home, I locked all the doors and windows, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. I was too scared to go to sleep, and every time I heard a sound outside, my heart raced. The next day, when I went back to work, the man was there again. This time, he was even more persistent, asking me out on a date in a voice that sounded like nails on a chalkboard. He kept hovering around me, making me feel suffocated. As the night went on, things only got worse. He started making strange, cryptic comments that sent shivers down my spine. I didn't know what he meant, but I knew it couldn't be good. Then, he started reaching out to touch me, his fingers cold and clammy against my skin. I tried to pull away, but he held onto me tightly, his grip like a vice. That's when I realized that this man wasn't just creepy, he was dangerous. I knew I had to get away from him before it was too late. I made a run for the back door, but he was right behind me. I could hear his heavy breathing and the sound of his footsteps pounding on the concrete. I knew he was going to catch me. But just as he was about to grab me, a police car pulled up outside. The man fled, disappearing into the darkness. The police took my statement, but I knew deep down that this wasn't over. I had a feeling that the man would be back, and next time, he wouldn't be so easy to escape. From that night on, I made sure to always have pepper spray and a whistle on me, just in case. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake off the fear that the creepy customer would return. Every sound made me jump, and I was constantly looking over my shoulder. One night, as I was closing up the gas station, I heard a knock on the door. My heart pounded in my chest as I peered through the window, but it was just a young woman who needed gas. I breathed a sigh of relief and let her in. But as she was paying, I noticed something strange. She was wearing the same bracelet as the creepy customer. My mind raced as I tried to figure out what it meant. Was she in on it? Was she working with him? Just then, the phone rang. It was the police. They had caught the creepy customer and wanted me to come down to the station to identify him. As I drove to the police station, my mind was in turmoil. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. When I arrived, they took me to a room where they had the creepy customer waiting for me. But as soon as I saw him, I realized that he wasn't the man who had been haunting me all these nights. I was confused, but then I saw the young woman in the corner of the room, watching me with a sinister smile on her face. She revealed that she had been the one stalking me all along, using the creepy customer as a diversion. I was paralyzed with fear as she explained that she had been watching me for weeks, studying my habits and routines. She was obsessed with me and wanted me all to herself. I knew I had to get out of there, but the young woman had other plans. she lunged at me, her eyes blazing with madness. In the struggle, I managed to grab a nearby object and hit her over the head, knocking her out. As I stumbled out of the police station, I knew that my life would never be the same. The terror of being stalked had left a permanent scar on my psyche, and I would never feel safe again. As I stumbled out of the police station, still in shock from the terrifying revelation, I realized that the young woman was not acting alone. There was another person involved. Over the next few days, I did everything in my power to keep a low profile. I didn't want to draw any attention to myself, knowing that whoever was behind the stalking could still be out there. But despite my efforts, strange things continued to happen. I would find my car moved to a different spot in the parking lot, or my gas station keys missing. I knew it wasn't just my imagination playing tricks on me. One night, as I was closing up the gas station, I heard a noise coming from the back room. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I slowly made my way towards the sound, clutching a metal pipe in my hand. As I turned the corner, I came face to face with the person behind the stalking. It was my ex-boyfriend, who I had broken up with months ago. He had become obsessed with me, and couldn't handle the rejection. He had been stalking me ever since, watching my every move and manipulating the young woman into helping him. I was terrified as he lunged towards me, but I managed to swing the metal pipe and hit him in the head. He fell to the ground, unconscious. I quickly called the police, and they arrived within minutes. They took my ex-boyfriend away, and I never saw him again. But the fear and trauma of the stalking stayed with me for years. I could never shake off the feeling that someone was watching me, waiting to strike. It was a horror story that I could never forget, and one that would haunt me for the rest of my life. Despite my ex-boyfriend being taken away by the police, I still couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I closed up the gas station at night, I felt as though there was someone hiding in the shadows, waiting to pounce. As the days turned into weeks, the feeling only intensified. I would find things moved around in the store, or the security camera footage would show strange figures lurking in the background. One night, as I was closing up, I heard a noise coming from the bathroom. My heart skipped a beat as I slowly pushed the door open, only to find the bathroom empty. I was about to dismiss it as my imagination, when I heard a faint whisper coming from behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. Suddenly, the lights went out. I was plunged into darkness, my heart racing as I fumbled for the flashlight. As I shone the light around the room, I caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure disappearing around the corner. I knew I had to get out of there, but the front door was jammed shut. I was trapped. I made my way to the back room, hoping to find a way out. But as I turned the corner, I came face to face with a grotesque figure, its eyes glowing in the darkness. I screamed and ran in the opposite direction, but it was too late. The figure had caught up with me, and I felt its cold, clammy hand on my shoulder. As I turned around, I came face to face with my worst nightmare. It was my ex-boyfriend, his face twisted into a grotesque mask of madness. He had escaped from the police and had been hiding in the gas station, waiting for his moment to strike. I was paralyzed with fear as he lunged towards me, his hands outstretched. But just as he was about to grab me, the police burst in and subdued him. As they dragged him away, I was left alone in the darkness, trembling with fear. The horror of that night would stay with me forever, and I would never be able to shake off the feeling that someone, or something, was still watching me. Months went by, and things had finally started to calm down. I had taken some time off work to recover from the trauma, and had even moved to a new town to start fresh. But even in my new home, I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. I would wake up in the middle of the night, convinced that someone was standing at the foot of my bed. One night, as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard a faint tapping at my bedroom window. I ignored it at first, but it grew louder and more insistent. I reluctantly got out of bed and walked over to the window, my heart pounding in my chest. As I peered outside, I saw a figure standing in the shadows. It was my ex-boyfriend, his face twisted into a sinister grin. He had followed me all the way to my new home, and was still fixated on me. I screamed and ran to the phone, but the line was dead. In a panic, I barricaded myself in my bedroom and waited for the police to arrive. Hours passed, and there was still no sign of help. I could hear my ex-boyfriend moving around outside, trying to find a way in. Just as I was about to lose all hope, I heard a loud banging at the front door. It was the police, finally arriving to save me. They arrested my ex-boyfriend, but the damage had already been done. The horror of that night would stay with me forever, and I could never shake off the feeling that he was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike again. From that day on, I lived in constant fear, always looking over my shoulder and never truly feeling safe. The horror of being stalked had taken over my life, and there was nothing I could do to escape it. Despite my newfound sense of humor, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. As the days passed, I noticed strange things happening around me. Objects would move on their own, doors would slam shut, and I would wake up to find scratch marks on my walls. At first, I tried to explain it all away as my imagination, but the occurrences became more and more frequent. I knew that something was wrong, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I felt a cold breeze sweep through the room. I turned around and saw a figure standing in the shadows, its eyes glowing in the dark. I screamed and ran to the door, but it slammed shut in my face. I was trapped, with the shadowy figure advancing towards me. I could feel its cold breath on my neck as it whispered in my ear. "I've been watching you," it said. "I followed you here. I'll never let you go." I tried to run, but the figure was too quick. It chased me through the house, its twisted laughter echoing in my ears. Just when I thought it was all over, I heard a knock at the door. It was my neighbor, who had heard my screams and came to investigate. The figure vanished into thin air, leaving me alone and shaking with fear. My neighbor called the police, who searched the house, but found nothing. As I sat in the living room, still trying to catch my breath, I noticed something odd. On the wall, written in a thick red substance, were the words, "You can never escape me." The horror of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. My ex-boyfriend might have been caught, but he had left something behind, a dark, malevolent presence that would haunt me for the rest of my days. I knew then that I could never truly escape the horror that had taken over my life. The fear would always be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike again. And as I looked up at the writing on the wall, I knew that I had entered a new nightmare, one that I could never wake up from. Thanks for with you. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.